Call this regular meeting of Council, Town of Oliver, Monday, November 9th, 2020. Call this meeting to order. Are there any late items to add to the agenda?
Not at this time, thank you.
Thank you, CAO. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda as circulated? Councillor Marieze, Councillor Grace. Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Moving to adoption of prior minutes. Adoption of October 26, 2020 regular open council meeting minutes. Can I get a mover to adopt those minutes as circulated? Councillor Schwarzenberger, Councillor Grace. Any further discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Moving to committee reports. October 26, 2020 Committee of the Whole meeting minutes for receipt. Can I get a move to receive those minutes? Councillor Grace. Councillor Marieze. Any further discussion? Seeing none, call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And now we'll get a verbal report from the Councillor Grace, who is the chairperson of the Committee of the Whole meeting this afternoon.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just a couple of items were on the agenda this afternoon. First was a delegation from the Oliver Community Theatre Society with their budget presentation. So we were introduced to their new board of directors as the AGM was last month. They have reopened with a local artist series and continue to plan and operate. Bookings now have COVID plans in place. Objectives are staffing, equipping using grants, creating financial reserves, and creating awareness with promoters, artists, and audiences. The theater was in very good shape this year until COVID and sort of put the brakes on all spending, but did financially well due to successes earlier in the year. So a bit of a challenge to budget going forward, projecting a loss this year, but with reserves hoping to come out even. We discussed a mask-wearing policy in town buildings, and after some discussion, Council decided to not create our own policy, but to leave that to the direction from the Provincial Health Officer. And then we had a notice of motion from Mayor Johansson, which I'll read rather than trying to explain, which reads that in preparation for the 2021 budget discussion, staff bring forward a report outlining the business tax multiple strategy adopted by Council in February 2012. The goal of the strategy was to shift the tax burden from business to residential. As such, the report should include an analysis of any shift in tax burden among these two property classes, and that the report include a description of the alternative tax distribution methods used amongst property classes, including pros and cons, and that the report include a competitive comparison analysis of business tax rates in Oliver to that of neighboring municipalities. And so that will come forward, I think, prior to budget discussions. And that is the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grace. Moving to water matters, we've got the 2020 water budget third quarter update. And I'll pass this over to the Chief Financial Officer, whose report is attached.
Thank you, Your Worship. The water budget is tracking on as expected for 2020. There's nothing really of any noteworthy that has transpired. Just want to remind Council that due to COVID-19, Council earlier this year passed the resolution where we reduced the first quarter water rates by 50%. We originally were going to put through a 4% increase in water rates for 2020, and as such, we also reduced the remainder of 2020 increase to zero. So there was no increase in water rates. Which does have an impact on our transfer to our capital reserve. But all in all, our revenues are tracking as we thought they would. Our expenses are as well. And the capital budget is coming in. Some projects either haven't started or are just being completed now. Gallagher Siphon, as we all know around the table, has commenced. They're working quite diligently over at Gallagher Lake right now. And that, I was looking at the actuals on that right now, and as of last Friday, we were at about $377,000 spent on that project to date. So that project is definitely moving ahead quite quickly. And myself and the CAO are certainly working very hard and diligently to try to access the $5 million grant fundings, monies that were promised to the town of Oliver from the provincial government, I believe in 2017. And so anyway, I know the CAO, as time keeps going, we're going to may have to come back to you. Hopefully not, but we're getting a little bit of resistance or constantly being requested more information that the province already has in regards to this project. So just sort of planting that seed. So thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Any questions for the Chief Financial Officer? Councillor Marieze?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just on the water fund revenues, I see user fees, the flat rate, and the parcel taxes are not at 100%. Are those areas that we would still recoup before the end of the year, or is that money?
Parcel taxes, we wouldn't recoup. The reason those were down, that probably the budget wasn't adjusted when we actually decreased our budget from that 4%. And what was the other one? I'm sorry?
The flat rate user fees? That's a $40,000.
Yeah, I'll have to take a look at that one and get back to you. That should be pretty close to what it is because that's irrigation. And so that should be pretty well what it's going to be for the rest of the year.
Okay.
Councillor Machial?
Just a quick question on the debt servicing. How much of that is the principal?
Go to your mic, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah. Yeah.
The debt servicing, Doug, how much of that is principal payment, down payment, and how much is interest? I'm just curious how much interest we're paying.
Boy. I'm really hesitant to give you a number, but if I had to give you one, I'd say 2/3 interest, 1/3 principal, somewhere in that ballpark. As obviously as financing, every 10 years, the Municipal Finance Authority will refinance, and of course, the interest rates are so. I know right now a 20-year debt authorization that's been given through the Municipal Finance Authority is less than 2%. It's just, I've never seen it this low, and it's the interest rates from everything I've seen in Treasury south of the line and in Canada, they're looking well into 2023, these low interest rates.
Any other questions, Council? Can I get a mover of the motion that Council receive the 2020-24 Water Operating Capital Budget Update Report dated October 22nd, 2020 for information? Councillor Machial, seconded Councillor Grace. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Moving to item 2, the October 2020 Water Quality Report. Director of Operations.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. October is a busy month for staff in our Public Works Department, and it's usually to do with winterizing, shutting down, shutting off, blowing out systems. So the guys were quite busy this month. Some of the key things that we did, turn-offs, that usually takes us approximately 3 to 4 days, and we put multiple people on it and divide it up. Especially the rural area, there's a lot of ground to cover. The canal was shut down on the 27th of October. Winterizing pump stations, drainage of the irrigation system. We're trying to drain the system as quickly as we could so H&M could start tearing up a portion of the canal for the Gallagher Lake project. We did some clearing in a section that we're shotcreting and fixing up just south of our dam diversion. So it's actually between the box culverts on Highway 97 where it crosses underneath the highway to the dam. So that's the next section we're doing. Besides that, we also, and you've probably noticed that we're continuously removing old radios and installing new radios because the old ones you can't find parts for, and after so many years you got to replace them. Nothing unusual so much for temperature, and well, a little bit unusual. We had an early snow. October, which caught everybody off guard. But the beginning of October was quite nice, and we were actually getting quite a few farmers that were getting a little antsy with us shutting down so early. But I think everything worked out. And again, people always have that choice of coming in and paying for the extra water for the rest of the month if they wish. Water usage, domestic was a little bit higher this month, and maybe because of the first couple of weeks of good weather in October before it changed. And but the irrigation was lower than the 7-year average, but higher than last year. Again, I think last year's October was quite cool. So if council had any questions or comments, that pretty much sums it up.
Any questions, comments for the director? Seeing none, can I get a mover of the motion that the October 2020 water quality report be received? Councillor Sidhu? Councillor Machial? Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Moving to councillor reports. Anything to report, Water Councillor Sidhu?
Just nice meetings, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Machial, anything to report? Thank you. That concludes water matters. Moving to delegations and petitions. Marieze Tarr, Executive Director, Desert Sun Consulting, is with us today. Talk about community housing and cold weather shelters.
Good
Welcome.
evening, Your Worship and Council. Yes, I'm happy to be here. So I am here tonight to share with you a little bit of background on the temporary emergency shelter. First of all, it's a pretty big word for something that that has been in existence for a long time. In the past, we used to call it cold weather shelters, and cold weather shelters were specific to cold nights. So I believe it was last year, BC Housing changed and the BC government changed it from cold weather shelters to temporary emergency shelters. And the new mandate is that that shelter is provided from November 1st until March 31st, regardless of weather. So the shelter is available to people to access any time during that time period. So that is what the temporary emergency shelter means. Why would we need a shelter in Oliver? And I think it's something that might surprise many of you, but by our count, last winter there were about 50 plus people in Oliver struggling with homelessness. Now, I just spoke to somebody who works with vulnerable people in the town of Oliver, and the quote, or the numbers that she gave me is actually a lot higher than that, but that is the people that our agency worked with in collaboration with Interior Health and the hospital. So who are these people? And another thing that might surprise you is that, you know, these people are not like homeless people using drugs on the street corners. We have seniors, youth, women, and men needing shelter during the cold winter months. Many of these people are housed in pickers' cabins, they live year-round in RVs out on somebody's land, and then when it becomes extremely cold, they cannot stay warm. Also, sometimes we have seniors who come here to live with their children or something like that, and there's a falling out, and we end up with senior people having nowhere to go. Last winter, to just give you an example about youth, we had youth who were camping in people's backyard in a tent when it was -15, because their parents, and them and their parents did not agree on certain things that were happening in, or behaviors that the parents were participating in. We successfully housed both of these youth in our affordable housing complex, and both of these youth went on to graduate. One moved down to family in the Lower Mainland, and the other one still is living independently at our affordable housing complex. These people are not all drug users, and those are not the people that we are looking at providing shelter to. So, it's not just our agency who are seeing these people. It is also people, social workers at the hospital, and as I said, we share offices with Interior Health, who also work with vulnerable people, and they are struggling as well to sometimes find housing at the last minute for people who are at risk of homelessness. And also, sometimes we tend to look at the homeless as people other than ourselves. But we have to keep in mind that these people are somebody's mom and dad, and somebody's child. So and they live amongst us. And so the question is, do we just want to ignore their suffering? Or do we, as people, want to extend a helping hand to help them access services that they need, to give them a hand up and not just a hand out? So it is the vision of Desert Sun that we will work with our homeless clients to end the cycle of homelessness and to help them, to help provide them with housing continuum. So by that, I mean that initially they will access the shelter, and with the help of staff, we will then provide them, move them out of the shelter to some transitional housing, and then to some independent housing. Often the most vulnerable amongst us have a hard time navigating the system, and that is where our staff will come in to help these people. So the shelter will not be operating all year round. It will operate during the cold winter months from November 1st until March the 31st. Obviously, we're not going to be able to open the shelter in the next couple of months if the permit is approved and funding from BC Housing is secured. But as soon as we have everything in place, we would like to provide shelter to people before the end of March window. So a stakeholder committee consisting of community members, Town of Oliver staff, and Desert Sun staff came up with a couple of possible locations for the shelter. And then the decision was made to house the shelter in the basement of the United Church, which is housed at 511 Church Avenue in Oliver. And of course, for us to proceed with this shelter, we need a temporary use permit from Town Council to operate the shelter, and we also would need funding from BC Housing. So we do have a couple of steps that we have to take before the shelter can be operational. We also would like to structure an advisory committee who will be fully engaged in assisting the Town of Oliver staff as well, and Desert Sun, once we're operating it, to operate the shelter and to come with recommendations from town as well as from community members. So this will be a high barrier shelter, so that means that we will responsibly screen applicants and only applicants who are who have not used drugs or alcohol on the day of entry will be allowed to stay in the shelter. So this a high barrier shelter and also means that we will not allow drug or alcohol use in the shelter or on the shelter grounds or around the shelter. A CCAN will be placed on the property, and each of our clients at the shelter will be allowed to store one bicycle, which will be registered with the shelter, and also one bag of belongings. And to access these belongings and the bicycle, staff and client will access the CCAN together. Also, the shelter will be locked from 10 p.m. until 7 a.m., so there will be no people coming and going through the night. And we also are not proposing a safe injection site near or on the property, which is something else that I think was raised on social media. There was some speculation with regards to there being a safe injection site. And because it's a high barrier shelter, that means that there will be no drug use on or around the operation. Okay. So while the clients are in the shelter, staff will work with clients to set goals for themselves, and staff will help them acquire BCID, also will help them with accessing funds, government funding, whether that would be a disability pension or some income assistance. And we will also connect them with other appropriate services that they might need. And we will also help them secure employment so that in the daytime they can go out and be employed just like anyone else. And as I said, we will help them with accessing a housing continuum, meaning that they will be moved along the housing continuum. We will provide 3 meals a day, and we will also provide free laundry services, and the laundry services will be located at the church. There won't be visitors coming and going. That will not be allowed. We are asking for a permit to operate 10 beds, but we will only start with 8 clients, and we will regard 2 beds as overflow. So there will be a maximum of 10 clients at any given time. So Desert Sun will be providing 24/7 staffing with 2 staff members on site at all times. And then all of our staff will be trained in dealing with vulnerable people, first aid, medical emergencies, and overdoses. Now, I know another question that was raised on social media was why would staff then be trained in overdoses if there's no alcohol or drug use allowed on the premises. All of our staff who work at Desert Sun, as well as Interior Health, are trained in overdose management, as we believe that is good practice. We deal with vulnerable people, and I'm sure many of you are aware that overdoses does not just happen with vulnerable people. It happens with neighbors. It happens with anyone. So we know that we live in an era where there's an opioid crisis in our province, and more people at the moment are actually dying from that than of COVID. So for this shelter to move ahead, we need funding for staffing, for the rent of the facility, and also for all startup costs, as well as for COVID PPE. And we are hopeful that we will be successful in securing funding from BC Housing. And so it is important to note that the funding has not been secured, and so the facility will not operate and the renovations will not start until funding is secured from BC Housing. And Desert Sun and the town of Oliver will put together terms of reference as well as policies and procedures, and that will be in place to operate the shelter. And once the permit is obtained, it is the wish of the stakeholder committee that worked together to come up with a location of the shelter, to establish an advisory committee, and this advisory committee will work very closely with Desert Sun in the operation of the shelter, so that the shelter is a good neighbor, and the advisory committee will also deal with feedback and concerns from the community. Thank you.
Thanks, Marieze. Any questions, Council? Councillor Grace?
Thank you, Worship. I have a few questions for you, Marieze. So one, to clarify that this shelter in particular would not house youth, it would be adults only, is that correct?
No, adults, only adults over 19 years plus.
So are people that are going to be housed, will they be brought through referral, or can people, or is it drop-in?
So it will be referral for sure, because we ourselves deal with, in our agency and in the hospital, deal with people who struggle with homelessness. And then it could also be in-person people referring themselves.
Okay. Would they be able to, though, show up at the shelter and look for a bed, or does it have to go through?
I don't believe that has actually, really been established, but I would like for that piece of the intake to happen actually at our office, at our main office.
Okay. And I mean, it's just speculation, but do you anticipate that the clients will stay long-term, or do you think there's going to be a lot of turnover throughout the 5 months?
I would say that seeing what I know from, what we're doing at our affordable housing project, is most of that population we sort of provide that first safety net for people. So the stay is 2 months, 1 to 2 months, and then we try to move people along and find them more permanent shelter, because a homeless shelter is not optimum. It's not a place where people would like to spend the rest of their lives. It is a place, sometimes a lot of people choose to live in a tent. We have many people who live in the Okanagan in tents in the summertime, and then once it gets really cold, they struggle. They will come to our office and look for warm clothes, socks, things like that. So will some of them stay with us for the winter and then move back to, being pickers and living on someone's farm in the summer? Maybe. But I would say, a lot of people will come there, stay for a couple of weeks, and for staff, give staff time to move them to the next, the next stage of housing.
Thank you.
I have one question, just sort of a comment on sequencing and a question, I guess, attached to it. You talk about establishing, once you got everything in place, establishing a committee and then putting together terms of reference and policies in place to operate the shelter. I'm just wondering, as far as, would it be possible to establish an advisory committee ahead of time and develop a terms of reference
Yes.
to come forward at the time of a temporary use permit, so that there's at least some level of comfort that a more rigorous public engagement has occurred?
So, yes, I would like to see the advisory committee become involved as early as possible in this process, because that, and people from the communities to sit, stakeholders such as the RCMP, people from Interior Health, people from the town office, people from various church organizations. So, and there'll be an invitation to community members at large to sit on this, on the committee. The basis of it being a high barrier shelter, that will not be negotiable. But, you know, terms of reference around the other areas will be. So, yeah.
Councillor Mattis, then.
Thank you, Your Worship. In terms of the application to BC Housing, is this temporary use permit that we'll be looking at later on, is that critical to the whole process?
Yes.
Like, nothing can move forward without that?
I don't believe so. We need a temporary use permit, because for that, look, we need a location first before we can approach PC Housing with a budget or anything like that.
Councillor Ventimiglia?
Thank you, and thanks for your presentation. Just going back to the residents for a bit. In the presentation, and I know from our housing needs assessment last year, we identified that over 50 people in the community were struggling with homelessness. So I'm wondering how the number 8 or 10 was reached, why that was decided
So
to be.
the number 8 or 10 was reached because we felt that that was a manageable number. We are not a huge, the town of Oliver, I don't know if we are able to help 50 people at you know, at one time. Even if you look at the Penticton shelter, their shelters are not huge. They have 20 beds, you know, the new shelter that they just opened. So the shelters typically are not huge. 10 to 12, those are sort of the average for smaller communities.
I have a couple of follow-ups. Is there room for growth within that facility?
So in that facility, most probably not. We have looked at that facility and following COVID protocols, we are easily able to house up to 10 people. There is another area available, and that area will not be used unless we have to isolate people. So post-COVID, maybe we will be able to house 12, 14 people, but at that location, unless we use the upstairs, I would not say that we can go beyond that number.
Okay. And just on the location, I don't know if you're able to share, but if you are, I'd be interested to know what some of the other options that were looked at in the community are.
Yeah, we were looking at more sort of, no, I can't even get on the like CCANs, you know, mobile units, like they're using at the moment for housing for pickers in Oliver, and moving it onto property somewhere in the Oliver area. The problem is there's not a lot of properties available for something like that. And yes, so that was the biggest barrier. Barrier was available space in the town of Oliver.
Okay. Thank you. For now.
Councillor Schwarzenberger?
Thank you, Your Worship. And Marieze, thank you for your presentation. I think all of council is looking towards a cold weather shelter, and it was part of our priority list. The issue is where it's going to be placed. So I think I would agree with the mayor that perhaps if we got the advisory committee up and running quicker, and that, you know, maybe some other locations would appear that could be looked into, as well as policies, I think that would give some more help for people who are having problems with possibly the location that it's situated in now, and what might be the issues going forward and how those would be addressed up front.
Councillor Grace?
Thank you, Worship. Through to the CAO, will the terms of reference come to council and safety plan prior to implementation?
Through the chair, the actual terms of reference for the committee would probably go through the Desert Sun themselves, but I know that I have seen a copy of the terms of reference and that are used down in Grand Forks. They actually shared their terms of reference for their advisory committee with us, and that's what the terms of reference are for. It's the makeup of the committee itself and what they'd be looking at, et cetera. It could be provided to you as information if you would like to see it, but it would be a committee that would be run through Desert Sun as opposed to the town of Oliver.
Thank you.
Any other questions? CEO?
Further to the question from Councillor Grice, with respect to that, probably what would be beneficial would be to have all of that information brought forward with the TUP if they continue to go forward at this particular spot, or if there's not another spot located,
I think that would be helpful. Yes, thank you.
so that you have that information.
Councillor Bentamila?
Yeah, thank you. That might have just answered the question, but I was going to ask a question about process. This presentation is informative, but I think if I understand correctly, it's just here for information. And we have 2 items on the agenda relating to the same topic. The next one being the temporary use permit, and that's where a decision of some sort is to be made. This is really just information. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, oh, actually, thank you, Anne. I am totally in favor of the idea of seeing terms of reference and a bit more information before proceeding, because I have lots of questions. I mean, not that I want to sit here for half an hour and ask one after the other, after the other, after the other, but I think that if I have that many questions, then I'm sure that those in attendance have questions, and those in the larger community do as well. And so it just seems like the proper process to allow time for that to unfold, and time for some give and take and back and forth, and get to a place where everybody's comfortable.
And, I want to make that clear. That is definitely, the way that I saw it too. Like, this is not something that can just happen overnight, but we have to start somewhere. And so, so tonight is a start.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions, Council? Seeing none, thank you, Marieze. Good information.
Thank you very much for the
Our next item is a development permit, variance permit, the temporary use permit, 511 Church Avenue. Director of Development Services has a report.
Thank you, Worship. I'll just briefly touch on the temporary use permit 2020-18 for 511 Church Avenue. Background: as part of Council's strategic plan, one of the priorities is to investigate and identify potential opportunities within the community for cold weather shelters. The housing needs report, as we had already touched on, estimated 50 youth who are provisionally housed and 32 to 40 people who are homeless or living in trailers or vehicles. The proposal before Council is the application seeking a 3-year temporary use permit to operate a cold weather shelter with the maximum of 10 beds seasonally, November 1st to March 30th, and to store a maximum of 1 metal storage container during the time that the shelter is in operation. The shelter would occur within the bottom floor of the existing United Church, which is approximately 3,200 square feet in size. And I didn't realize that there's 31 days in March, so I should have had that up there. Property location map, as you're aware, it's at the corner of Church Avenue and Kootenay Street. Zoning is administrative, institutional, and cultural, AI. The OCP is actually high-density residential. Photos of the subject property on the left is the east elevation from Kootenay Street On the right is the north elevation from Church Avenue. Oops. The photo on the left now shows the north elevation from Church Avenue, and the photo on the right shows the west elevation, which the area with the star there is the best place for a CCAN in this case. Photo on the left just shows the south property line and the emergency exit, which I'll touch on a little bit here. And the photo on the right shows the south property line with, there's two parts to the wall, the gap in the wall being the property line. The existing main floor plan of the United Church, I don't know if there's a red pointer. There is? I don't know if I want to break anything, but yeah, you'll see the entry is on the northeast side of the building, and then there's the emergency exit on the south central side, which, as I mentioned, I'll touch on in a second here. The metal storage container, in conjunction with the cold weather shelter, the applicants are requesting that a metal storage container be permitted on the subject property during the time that the shelter is in operation. The container will be located in the southwest corner of the property, adjacent to the lane and virtually hidden from the streets, plural. The metal storage container will be approximately 10 feet by 8 feet in size and will enable clients to store their bicycles and other necessities in a secure place during their stay. There's no room within the shelter to store their belongings. And I did want to point out that it could be slightly bigger. I don't want to promise that it would be an 8 by 10, but the fact is the metal storage container is needed. Staff comments. So as per section 22.1 of the OCP, the objective of a temporary use permit is to avoid conflicts between different types of uses. The subject property is a corner property located in the downtown area within a mix of various types of uses. So there's single family, multifamily, institutional, commercial, the Elks Hall is there, the museum. The property is surrounded by 2 streets in a lane, which helps to act as a buffer from the neighboring properties and limit the conflicts between uses. The entry exit to the shelter is on the north side, which is on the opposite side of the neighboring residential property to the south, being 6242 Kootenai Street. Staff do note that an existing emergency exit is located on the south side of the church, which exit into a grass area that's being encroached upon by the neighboring property. There's no fencing to delineate or provide privacy between the two properties. Furthermore, it's not possible for a person to exit the church property, in the case of an emergency, onto the street without climbing that rock wall I showed earlier, or trespassing through the front of the neighboring property and using their gate. For these reasons, staff are recommending that this situation be rectified as a condition of the permit, which will require that a fence be installed along the eastern half of the south property line, as well as a pedestrian access to be built through the rock wall to be used in case of emergency. The costs associated with these requirements will be included as part of the funding application to BC Housing. It would also be best that that gate through the rock wall would be a one-way gate, where it couldn't actually be opened from the outside and only be used in case of emergency. So as per section 22.2 of the OCP, the town of Oliver may consider the following criteria in evaluating a temporary use permit application. The use must be clearly temporary or seasonal in nature. The temporary use permit before us is for a cold weather shelter from November 1st to March 31st for a 3-year period. This is both seasonal and temporary in nature. The town of Oliver should also consider, council should consider the compatibility of the proposal with adjacent uses and opportunity to conduct the proposed use on land elsewhere in the community. Although there may be other uses, or other properties rather, in the community that the proposed use could be located, staff consider that this location is best fit given its centrality and proximity to nearby services. Other locations will have issues with proximity to services or larger conflicts with commercial or industrial uses. Another factor in choosing this site is the availability. The bottom floor of the United Church is available and limited building code upgrades are required. The United Church operates a soup kitchen once a week and has for several years without any bylaw complaints. Consideration was given to placing a maximum number of beds permitted to be at 10, which will help to limit the impacts of the neighboring properties and to achieve proper social distancing measures within the building. Wanted to touch a bit on the notification that occurred for the temporary use permit. Section 494 of the Local Government Act requires a notice be published in a newspaper at least 3 days and no more than 14 days before council passes a resolution to issue the permit. Letters must also be sent to neighboring properties at least 10 days before council passes a resolution to issue the permit. Staff can confirm that the required notification process was followed as highlighted below. Notice was published in the Times Chronicle on Thursday, October 29th, which is 11 days prior. Notices were mailed out on Tuesday, October 27th, 13 days prior, and 2 signs were installed on the property on Thursday, October 29th, which is required by the town's land use procedure bylaw. It is difficult to predict the mail system and how quickly it gets there, but we do our best to send it out 13 days prior. Now, I wanted to point out, council could defer the matter to a public information meeting. Land use bylaw 4.11 criteria for requiring this meeting. Council may require that the meeting be held prior to consideration of a zoning or OCP amendment or an application for a temporary use permit or renewal if it considers the proposal to be of significant scale or nature, warranting an additional opportunity for the public to access information and inquire about the proposal beyond what is available at this meeting. Council may require an applicant for a zoning bylaw amendment or temporary use permit application or renewal to conduct a public information meeting if any of the following criteria are met. The zoning bylaw amendment or TUP requires an OCP bylaw amendment, and the zoning bylaw amendment or TUP would result in a significant land use change. Options for council is that council may choose to support the recommendation, council may choose not to support the recommendation, or they may choose to refer it back to staff for additional information. And with that, the staff recommendation is that council approve TUP 2020-18. As a condition of the permit, the following works be completed as per Figure 10 of the Director of Development Services report dated November 9, 2020, to provide adequate emergency egress from the south side of the building to the street and to provide privacy from 6242 Kootenai Street. These items being a fence installed along the eastern half of the south property line, and that emergency access to the street be provided through the existing rock wall, and that staff be directed to issue the permit. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Mattis?
One quick question. How long would the public process take?
Are you referring to a public information meeting?
Yes.
Yeah, I would have to look through our land use procedure bylaws, but we could work on starting to schedule for that right away. And then I'm hoping in the next few weeks would be a good timeline, but I can't confirm until I read our land use procedure bylaw.
Councillor Grace?
Thank you, Worship. Okay, so I have a few questions. I will say that I am in favor of holding a public information meeting. I think there's been quite a lot of discussion on this, both online through public feedback that's been submitted. So I think that would be our due diligence to make sure that we do that. I had discussed with the CAO looking into the cost of doing ATCO-style trailers. So I don't know if she has that information available or perhaps for another meeting.
We did quickly look online today. There was something online for ATCO trailer with washrooms, I do believe, 16 by 20, and it was $76,500. I have put in a quote to a company. I've asked for a quote for an ATCO type style encampment, which would have laundry facilities, kitchen facilities, sleeping for 10, office space. I've asked for a quote on that but I have not received that as of yet.
And to clarify, though, the BC Housing grant would not pay for that?
No, that would not be covered by BC Housing. That's something that the community would have to provide.
So if I may continue. Yeah, I just want to make sure that no one feels that this is being dropped into their neighborhood. I know it's really difficult with a proposal like this. I spent some time speaking to the neighbors who live in the property with the shared property line, and I think they have some really legitimate concerns for safety and, they're worried. It's right next door, and I can understand that. I'm definitely for a cold weather shelter. Frankly, I'm for a permanent shelter, but I think we need to do our best not to impose this, I guess, on the neighbors. So I think that having a public information meeting would be a logical next step. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments, would you like to make a motion? Or Councillor Mattis?
Thank you, Your Worship. Now, is the public information session, is that held by the town or by the applicant?
Section 4.12, which talks about the scheduling of a public information meeting, it says, where a public information meeting is required by council, the applicant shall pay all costs associated with the public information meeting. It is the applicant's responsibility to the satisfaction of the town of Oliver to arrange and conduct the meeting according to the following guidelines, which talks about the days that it can happen, which times, to hold it on a Tuesday through a Thursday. It shall be advertised in the paper. It shall be held at a venue located within boundaries of the town of Oliver. Yes, so hopefully that answers.
That answers the question.
Councillor Grace?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm wondering, just with the public interest in this matter, if there's a possibility of holding this meeting virtually, because I think that it's going to be difficult to cap our capacity at 50 people.
It could be 50 people at a time, or one person at a time coming in, getting the information, and then the next person. That would be up to the applicant to determine the best route.
Like an open house?
Yes, with limited entry.
Director?
I found what was effective through our plaza consultation is if you hold it from 3 to 6, then the people that aren't working during the day could come by from between 3 and 4, and then the people that do work during the day can start to trickle in, and I don't think there would be more than 50 people attending at one time.
Councillor Grace?
Thank you, Your Worship. So just to be clear, the applicant being the church, then the church would have to pay the costs for the consultation?
I believe the applicant is Desert Sun.
It's a church.
Either or.
That could be sorted out.
Councillor Ventimiglia?
Thank you. And a public information meeting can be held anywhere, right? Like it could be held in the church basement. Yeah. I'm fully supportive of a public information meeting, and I depending on how it goes over the course of 3 or 4 hours, it may even be the first of a series or more than one. But I've been sitting back here quietly trying to figure out how to word this, and I don't know how to word it properly, and I know time's running out. But I would be interested in looking a little bit further into other possible locations within the community. And I don't know if that happens in tandem with the planning of a public information meeting or if it happens before. That's why I was sitting here quietly. But hearing, when I asked the question earlier, what were the other locations that were looked at, unless it sounds like only trailers were looked at being brought in to be placed somewhere. And I don't know if another suitable location exists. I have no idea. I wasn't a part of the committee, and maybe the committee's already been through this, and if they have, then that's just information that I'm not aware of. But it seems like, especially when we're talking 3 years, it's just worth having another look around to make sure that we've selected the most suitable location, and to make sure that we're not missing it if there's a better one just waiting to be found.
Thank you. CAO?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to speak at this as I was part of forming that working group due to the fact that it was a council priority that brought this all forward. And I approached the different community groups within Oliver as well as Desert Sun. So this is brought about from a council priority perspective as to why it's sitting here right now. And what we looked at when we were doing this was the Alliance Church wanted to really help, but they have land. They don't have any building that they could accommodate people in, per se. We were looking in town, I looked at the Portuguese Club due to the fact that they're no longer in there, and that could house about 8 people, but the community center is using that for programming. And then in talking with all these different service groups, there was no particular place that anybody could actually provide any space for it. Then we started looking at our piece of property next to the food bank and possibly putting ACO trailers there. When we were looking at getting costs from that, I also had touched base with a company in Alberta about putting up a temporary shelter. They do those types of buildings up north, et cetera. So I was asking for information from them on what type of cost would be around a building that could be put somewhere, but it can be taken down and put somewhere else. And I never did get a cost from them with respect to that. And then I approached the United Church because I was told that they were looking at possibly doing something with their building or selling it. And I approached the Reverend Ken at that point in time and spoke to him about the cold shelter, and he spoke to his congregation, and that's when they said that we could use their basement for that. So at that point in time, there was no more looking, because we had felt that we had a place for the shelter to go, and then we started to look at that and get costs associated with all those things. So it's all driven from my desk per se, due to the fact that I was assigned the cold shelter priority from council.
Thank you, CAO. Councillor Grace?
Thank you, Your Worship. And yeah, that's sort of where I was going with the trailers too, was just to make sure that we've sort of exhausted all resources. But I think given the amount of objection that we've reached or heard from certain members of the community, I think it's worth just taking another look around to see if there is another location available. I mean, I hesitate because I think, you know, in a town our size, it's going to be in somebody's backyard or it's going to be in some business's backyard, and there's always going to be objection. But until we sort of exhausted all other options, I think it's worth taking another look. Thank you.
Councillor Mattis?
Thank you, Your Worship. I will make an attempt here that at a motion is that council direct that a public information hearing or public information meeting be held by the applicant for temporary use permit 2020-18, and the results be compiled and shared with council. And further, that staff be directed to continue looking for alternate locations.
I'll second that motion.
Mayor. Councillor Ventimiglia?
Thank you. Again, just kind of wondering out loud, because this is a council priority, came from here 2 years ago. It seems, I know it's the process, but it seems maybe a bit onerous to place the information meeting at the doorstep of the applicant while we're in the process of seeing if there's a more suitable location. So I wonder if we could not host a public information meeting about the concept of a cold weather shelter, obviously with this being the, you know, currently selected location, but sort of like a preliminary. I know it makes the process longer and it puts more steps in there, but I feel like if we're going to do this, we should do it right, or as best as we can. And out of that meeting or out of that information session may come options that we've never thought of. But that would be something that I would feel more comfortable having us do as basically the people who requested this be looked into in the beginning.
Councillor Mattis?
Thank you, Your Worship. I've worded it in this fashion because it meets what our current policy and process is, but I would be more than happy to change the council directly public information meeting to be held by the applicant in conjunction with town staff for the temporary use permit 2020-18 and the results and so on.
I'll, again, second, and then we can open that up to discussion.
Councillor Schwarzenberger?
I was just going to say I was going to second that amended motion.
Does that catch what you were thinking or trying to say?
Yeah, it's not all the way there, but it takes the pressure off of the applicant a bit, because it does seem like here we're asking them to go out and get information, and at the same time, we're doing something in a potentially completely different direction. So if staff works alongside the applicant, we've done this before, our staff has done this before, and sort of the information gathering, I view it as an information gathering session for us as well as the community. The information gathering continues to happen, again, just as another step in the process to get us to wherever the end is.
Councillor Grace?
Thank you, Your Worship. And hopefully, at the same time, not something that's going to be costly for the church for the same reasons as, you know, if we do end up going with another location, I don't want them to be out of pocket for consulting with the public.
I have a motion on the table. Any further comments? Any further discussion? I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Moving on to item 2, Development Variance Permit 861 Panorama Place, Director of Development Services.
Thank you, Worship. This application, the PowerPoint is opening. This application is Development Variance Permit 2020-16 for 861 Panorama Place. The applicant's proposing to construct a single-family dwelling with an attached garage. To facilitate the construction, 2 variances to zoning bylaw 1380 are required. One of them being section 10.1.6 AI to decrease the minimum front parcel line setback from 4.5 meters to 2.5 meters. And the second variance being to section 10.1.6 AII to decrease the minimum rear parcel line setback from 4.5 to 3.9 meters. Here's the property location map. There's a zoomed in version there. You can see the existing dwelling has the red star there, which will be demolished. The zoning is RS1. It's amongst an area with RS1 zone properties. The green strip there is the irrigation canal. The OCP is for low density residential. So due to the way that, I'll speak about it in a minute here, but the front setback has to be the parcel where there's the parcel line where there's street frontage. So in this case, the front parcel line is actually, is the button, sorry, Diane, is the green button the pointer on the side?
No, the arrows. The arrows. Oh, the one.
There it is.
Yeah, there
Okay. So this is the front parcel line. Yeah, I won't hit you. The front parcel line is actually this line, which is a bit different than all of the neighboring properties. So when I go back to here, I can show you. In this case, so this is the front parcel line, this is the rear. There's the front, there's the rear, and so on. But in this case, this is the only piece of street frontage, so this is actually considered the front, and this being the rear, and these are interior side parcel lines. And what that does is it actually places more restrictions along these parcel lines because they aren't considered interior side parcel lines anymore. They're front and rear parcel lines. Photos of the subject property. On the left is the west elevation, so this is looking from Panorama Place. And on the right is the west property line, so there's some hedges there. The left shows the south portion of the subject property with the canal being right there, now that I got this thing working. The photo on the right is the east property line. And there is the existing dwelling to be, I understand it may not be demolished, it might be relocated, which is good news. The site plan here shows the garage. So as I mentioned, this is sort of looking a different direction now, but this is the portion of the property that has the street frontage. So being the front property line, there's the rear. So you can see the dash lines are what the required setbacks are. So on this side, they're going to 2.96, I believe. And then this one is the 3.9 off this side. And there's the conceptual floor plan, which is actually in reverse, but this is the double car garage on that side. Staff comments. So as I mentioned, it's the definition of parcel line front, which then it makes the requirement for the setback variance in this case. The impacts of a reduced front setback is mitigated by the row of hedges that I showed along here. So this is the front setback would encroach towards this property, and it'll be mitigated by this row of hedges. And when talking about the rear parcel line, the setback reduction from 4.5 to 3.9, they're requesting this to accommodate the construction of an attached garage. If the garage were detached, then it'd be a 1.5 meter rear setback. A single-story garage is unlikely to pose any privacy concerns on the adjacent neighbors, whose dwelling is located a fair distance away. So although a dwelling could be built on the subject property within the setbacks, the proposed variances allow for a new dwelling to be constructed in a similar footprint and orientation as the existing dwelling, which is consistent with the design of the surrounding neighborhood. With that, the options for council is that council may choose to support the recommendation, may choose not to support, or may choose to refer it back to staff. The staff recommendation is that council approve development variance permit 2020-16 and that staff be directed to issue the permit. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Ventimiglia?
Thank you. So if this parcel were if the setbacks were a rear, front, side were the same as all of the neighbors, what's being asked for, 2.54 meters for the front parcel line and 3.96 for the rear, they would actually be allowed 1.5, right? So they actually aren't building as close as they could, should things be flipped around.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, if it was orientated the same as the neighboring parcels, those would be interior side parcel lines, which then would have a 1.5 meter setback.
Okay, thank you. And then just for my own curiosity, when you show the overview photos or the lot lines, it looks like the lot lines butt up right to each other. But then it looks like the neighbor that's on Fairview, yeah, see the driveway going over the property? They just have an easement on the property or something like that?
Yeah, that's a strange situation. I don't believe that there is an easement or anything. It was obviously just a historical agreement. So that the neighbors would have to sort that out between themselves. But that property would have access from Fairview as well. That was just a secondary access.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. I'd move the staff recommendation if there's no other questions.
Councillor Mattis?
Sometimes it's just the orientation of the picture from the satellite as well, that the property lines aren't actually where they appear. On this particular one, I have exactly the same thing on one of the properties that I own in town. Went through the same process with council many, many years ago. It's just unfortunate that our definitions and rules make it such that a particular lot in a particular location doesn't match the neighbors. But in order to have a proper building envelope, it certainly makes sense to grant a variance. It's an unfortunate circumstance that we have to charge for it, but that's just the way it is, so I would support the recommendation as well.
We have a mover of the recommendation.
Yeah, I'll second.
A second, Councillor Mattis. I too support the recommendation. Is there any other discussion, comments? Hearing none, I'll call a question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Moving to bylaws. First one is the Fire Control Amendment Bylaw 1369.01 for first, second, and third reading. I will pass it over to the corporate officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. The report before Council this evening is to seek Council's enactment of Fire Control Amendment Bylaw 1369.01. As a bit of a background, back October 26, 2020, at a Committee of the Whole meeting, Council discussed outdoor burning with the potential to use wood, propane, natural gas, and briquettes in residential backyards. At this meeting, council chose not to add outdoor burning in receptacles using wood. So the amendment for section 15, burning without a permit, is to not include wording speaking to using wood, but council did ask that we added additional wording with respect to using natural gas, propane, and briquettes for a fireplace, outdoor fireplace, or an outdoor barbecue. Additional amendments relate to section 7 under services, and in the staff report they're highlighted in red. The important or the new thing is the first responder, and the fire chief indicates that inclusion of first responder to the bylaw could see an increase in call volume to the department, potentially up to 50 calls per year, which could see an increase in salary costs to the fire department members. These first responder calls are in support of BC or emergency health services for calls of immediate life-threatening, like cardiac or respiratory arrest, and they're deemed critical. They're classed as purple or red calls. The intent of the fire department is only to have a duty crew respond, which would be limited to 3 or 4 members, not a crew of 12. At this time, BC Ambulance, when they're not available, they may be out transporting a patient to another hospital, and that's why the fire department would be called. With regard to adding additional wording into the bylaw, at that October meeting, we talked about the fire chief taking on the role as fire inspector for the town of Oliver, and reviewing section 23, inspection of premises. We believe that the required wording for fire inspections is covered already in the bylaw, that every occupier of premises shall provide all information and shall render all assistance required by the fire chief or any member in connection with the inspection of such premises pursuant to this bylaw, the Fire Code, and the Fire Services Act. Just as a little bit further background, back in 2007, the town had issued a tender for fire prevention and inspection services, and Safety by Design was awarded the contract, and they provided us great services since then. However, in about 2015, 2016, the company's intent was to retire, and town staff attempted on 2, and finally the last occasion in 2019, so 3, we weren't able to find a contractor who was willing to take on that service. And what we found is it was similar to all municipalities in the Okanagan and the regional district areas. So they, the fire chiefs designates took training and got certified so we could provide our own fire inspection services. And our building official is also certified to provide that service, which is really great. So I have recommendations before council that council may wish to give 3 readings to the Fire Control Amendment Bylaw 136901. Council may choose not to support the recommendation, or council may wish to refer back to staff for additional information. And a proposed motion is before council this evening for Fire Control Amendment Bylaw 136901 be read a first, second, and third time, and that the adoption of the bylaw be scheduled for the November 23rd, 2020 meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments, questions, council? Councillor Bentapila.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. And maybe my memory is not the best, but from the 2 additions that we have regarding outdoor burning, both of them speak to apparatuses that are approved by the fire chief. And I thought that in our last conversation, that's not what we wanted, that he didn't want the responsibility of approving each and every apparatus.
It's like the CAO wants to speak.
Thank you. Through the chair, I do believe the conversation was around he didn't want to have to inspect every unit if there was wood burning, but if we would have had wood burning.
But what it looks like it says to me, well, what it does say, so what I understand is the operation of a permanent or portable outdoor fireplace using natural gas, propane, or briquette. So that could be like, a little fire pit that I bring home and hook up to propane that you can, buy at any hardware store, that is approved by the fire chief is permitted. So to me, that says that every apparatus that is being lit needs to be approved. And then it says the same thing about cooking devices as well, like outdoor barbecues. I just thought that from our conversation, that's not what I understood, because that seems incredibly onerous and a bit of a waste of time.
Councillor Schwarzenberger?
Thank you, Worship. I agree with Councillor Ventimiglia. I don't think the fire chief wants to go out and approve 2,000 barbecues in the town of Oliver. So I would suggest we just add wording in both 1 and 2 of the section that's being changed, that is CSA approved or approved by the fire chief.
How about UL approved as well?
UL or CSA, either one. And that would, anything that's purchased at a drug or at a hardware store or something like that would have one of those two notifications or approvals. So I think that would cover getting the fire chief off the hook for looking at every barbecue in town.
I agree. Certifications are there, and if it's not certified, then the fire chief has to put a stamp of approval on it. Councillor Ventimiglia.
Great idea. One more comment, just in this new section that was added this evening that we hadn't seen before, nothing big, but I think that when we're looking at, when we're redoing bylaws and pieces of information as we go, it's just a chance to clean up our language. So in there, just in section 7A, and I think a few times throughout, when it's speaking to the fire chief, it says he shall. So if we can either say he, she, or they, it's just an opportunity to clean up our language.
So with those changes, we can still give it first, second, third reading, and then be changed when it comes back for adoption?
Or we could have the changes made and bring it back. There's no rush
Okay.
on doing this. It's not like we need to immediately have it done this evening. It could come back to the next meeting.
Okay.
So on that basis, I would make the motion that's going up, that Fire Control Amendment Bylaw 136901 be referred back to staff for amendment.
I'll second that.
Great. Any further discussion?
15, 7 and 15.
Call the question then. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Moving to item 2 under bylaws, road closure bylaw 1399, Station Street, for first and second reading. Corporate Officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. The road closure amendment bylaw 1399 for Station Street is before Council for your initial enactments. As a little bit of history, as part of Council's 2018-2022 strategic priorities under the downtown revitalization category, number 2 is the town-owned land development proposal. And in that section, it's outlining that staff will work with the Downtown Advisory Committee and consultant to bring forward a proposal for Station Street Plaza, Station Street Design B class design cost, town hall relocation, staff to investigate the feasibility of relocating parking and access to Station Street for Lions Park, and the bolded section, which is to proceed with the road closure in design of Station Street. With that action, staff engaged a surveyor, and a preliminary reference plan has been completed for the road closure for the portion of Station Street besides Lots 6 and 7, Block 3, Town Site of Oliver, and Lots 1 and 2, Plan 5, 6, 15, which is attached to the road closure bylaw and shown in heavy black bold. Preliminary discussions with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to assess their approval for the road closure occurred recently with Mr. Wiseman and Mr. Keir and staff. The ministry is in support of the road closure, citing safety concerns of vehicles entering Highway 97. They also provided positive comments to the Town of Oliver for the initial work completed on Station Street and the planned improvements that are yet to be done on Station Street to Veterans Avenue. The ministry does recommend eliminating the slope when the town undertakes the improvements on Station Street and the proposed plaza works. At the July 6, 2020 Strategic Planning Meeting, Council requested that the property lines on the triangular properties that are owned by the Town of Oliver's, lots 6 and 7, be adjusted to square off without compromising the property on the east side of Station Street. The survey shows an adjustment to the lots to square off and accommodate future road improvements on Station Street. As part of the public process for a road closure, the community charter requires the town undertake statutory advertising prior to third reading. A notice of disposition will be placed in the Times Chronicle. And additionally, this notice will be sent to adjacent property owners to ensure that they have the opportunity to make representations to council on the potential road closure. All comments will be brought to council prior to third reading of the road closure bylaw. So there's some options before council that council may wish to give first and second reading to road closure bylaw 1399 Station Street. Council may wish to refer back to staff for additional information, or council may choose not to give first, second reading to road closure bylaw 1399 Station Street. And the recommendation is that council give road closure bylaw 1399 Station Street be read a first, second time, and that council direct staff to submit to the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure for approval and proceed with public notification. Thank you.
Thank you, Corporate Officer. Questions, comments, Council? Councillor Schwarzenberger?
I don't have any questions, but I'll move the recommendation that was read by the corporate officer.
Moved. Second, Councillor Grace. Any further discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Moving to business, commercial land lease for airport hangar. Default of commercial land lease for airport hangar. Corporate officer's report is attached.
Thank you, Your Worship. The purpose of this report is to provide council an update on the default of the commercial land lease for an airport hangar called, when we entered into the lease, it was Northern Helicopters, and it's now known as Aurora Aviation. As a bit of a background, back in 2016, the town entered into a commercial land lease to lease a portion of the airport. It's a lot 2. It's currently undeveloped with Northern Lights Helicopter, which is now Aurora Aviation. The town has been in an early communication with the Aurora Aviation with respect to the late lease payments. The president recently communicated with the chief financial officer, and he advised that the company has not chosen not to pay. They are currently unable to pay due to the conditions beyond their control. The president did state that in 2019 was a 30-year career low fire season in Canada, and this year, unbelievably, was 90% below last year. This is not just for Aurora, but all across the country. Fire revenues were down 90%, and due to COVID-19, non-fire revenues were also down 90%. They commented, imagine running Oliver on 10% of normal revenues. However, Aurora is currently unable to pay, and due to conditions beyond their control, the president stated that it is understood if the town must cancel the lease. As a bit of a little more background, in 2019, the council did enter into a modification agreement with Aurora for the Lot 2, which was, they were in default for not developing the lot, and council gave them an additional 2 years to do that development. and they were to provide updates on their progress. It's important to know that the leaseholder is in default, but if we cancel the lease, that doesn't mean that they're still not responsible for the amount of monies owing to the town of Oliver. The Chief Financial Officer did provide information that that legislation allows the town of Oliver to unilaterally cancel the lease payment. However, we don't have the legal authority to write off taxes that are levied on the property. In order to write off property taxes, the town must seek a ministerial order from the province. A notice of termination of lease and recovery of possession and statutory declaration has been prepared and must be provided to the Registrar of Titles in order to discharge the lease from the land title. When a lease is registered with the Land Titles Office, BC Assessment then begins the assessment of the property for taxes for assessment. The parcel is included in the assessment base for the town. When the lease is defaulted, the town has no recourse to recover the property taxes on the parcel of land, as the property is owned by the town of Oliver, who is classed as being exempt from taxation. The municipality cannot write off property taxes unilaterally and must seek permission from the province to do so. So that's part of the reason why we want to get the lease canceled, so we can get it, so they're not assessing property taxes to a property that we own. So the resolution before council, I have some options that you may wish to terminate the commercial land 10-year lease. Council may wish to direct staff to enter into discussions regarding repayment schedule, or council may wish to defer to staff for additional information. The recommendation is that council resolves to terminate the lease between the town of Oliver and Northern Lights Helicopters, dated for reference March 1st, 2016. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Grace?
Thank you, Worship. Through to the corporate officer, have Northern Lights given any indication of a desire to develop or willingness to pay when they're able to come up with a payment schedule, anything like that?
They haven't given an indication of payment, no. They've said that they're not able to pay. And for development of the lot, they did enter into an additional 2 years, but they haven't given us any communication since we've given that modification agreement.
Thank you.
Seeing no comments, questions, Councillor Mattis?
I'll make the motion that council resolves to terminate the lease between the town of Oliver and Northern Lights Helicopters Limited, dated for reference March 1st, 2016.
I'll second.
Moved. Second, Councillor Schwarzenberger. Any further discussion? Councillor Ventimiglia?
I just, I'm finally at the stage where I can say, I remember when. It's sad to see this happen because I was on council. I remember when they came and made their presentation about the business that they were bringing to town, and it seemed great. So I'm sad to hear that they've had a rough couple of years, but it is what it is.
Any further comments, discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Moving on to item 2, COVID-19 Safe Restart Grants for Local Governments. CFO, you have a report for us.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is obviously very good news for a lot of smaller municipalities, not so good news for a lot of larger municipalities. I don't know if anybody has followed that news. The province announced as part of the COVID restart program, in conjunction actually with the federal government, monies that are coming forward to smaller municipalities and large ones, all municipalities in British Columbia. And they have a different weighted formula, so it's based on a base amount plus a weighted per capita amount. So, for example, here in Oliver, we received, or will be receiving, we haven't received it yet, $1.5 million approximately, almost 1.6. And some of the larger municipalities in the province didn't get that same per capita, where, for example, Vancouver got 16 million. I think the city of Penticton, I heard, was like 4.1 million. And if you do the math on that, you'll go, that seems it's not proportionately equal on a per capita basis. And of course, there's a lot of discussion amongst that at the provincial level. In any regards, this is great news. However, like I said, the funding is intended to support local governments addressing revenue shortfalls, facility reopening operating costs, emergency planning and response costs, bylaw enforcement, protective services, computer and electronic technology, costs to improve connectivity and virtual communications, services for vulnerable persons, and other related costs. And at this point in time, the recommendation was to move this towards the 2021-2025 budget process and come back to council with some options. And I'm sure council will have some options themselves, some ideas, what they would like to, where this money should be spent and priorities where they'd want to be spent. So I just want to inform council, and I'm sure you've already are aware, but this is very good news. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, CFO. Any questions? Councillor Mattis.
No questions, but I'd just like to make the comment, I certainly hope that the revenue shortfalls that we encountered within our water system this year, where we lowered rates and held rates, that some of that would be, or if not all of that, would be recoupable as part of the lost revenue that they refer to.
Seeing no other comments, can I get a mover of the motion to receive the information and refer to the 2021-2025 budget process? Councillor Grace. Seconded, Councillor Schwarzenberger. Seeing no further hands, I will call a question. Those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Moving to item 3, 2020 financial plan, third quarter update, operations. CFO, you have a report for us?
Thank you, Worship. This is in conformance with the financial plan policy, just to provide quarterly updates to council as to how our financial operations are doing for both this is the general fund as well as the sewer fund for operations and for capital. And for the most part, you can see that things are tracking according to, even in a COVID year, we're doing quite well considering. We're an older municipality, so a lot of our residents are not of working age, shall I say. I don't want to say any more than that, but it's just a lot of our sources of revenue, we're not recreation based, because we do that through the regional district and some of our other services like our theater, even some of our heritage things. A lot of our services are shared with the regional district, so we don't have that type of exposure. But saying that, like I said, I think we're doing quite well. Our capital budget is proceeding along as well, tracking accordingly, and I know Sean is working hard on getting a lot of the projects done that he can get done, and we're going to be moving into budget season here very quickly. Thank you, Worship. Thank you.
Councillor Mattis.
Thank you, Worship. I was initially concerned about the 50% bylaw enforcement, other protection revenue, but then I looked on the expense side and it's equally low, so that's a positive thing.
Anyone want to move the motion for receipt of information? Councillor Schwarzenberger. Moved. Second, Councillor Grace. Any other further questions of the CFO? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And we'll jump into the 2020 financial plan third quarter update for capital.
Thank you, Worship. I'm not going to expand a lot further than what I've already expanded. Like I said, the projects have been tracking. We've had some of our projects haven't been spent at all. For example, or very little. The rehab Packing House Lane, and that's going to be coming forward as part of the 2021 budget discussions. And we have completed, like our command vehicle or water tender, some work in the cemetery. Bridge Park construction, that's complete now. So we did come under budget on that. I believe all the holdbacks have been released on that as well. And you see some of our solar initiatives with the solar pathway lightings, the Fairview Park solar. I believe also, I'm having trouble finding it, but I thought we had a fire hall. It's in here somewhere for our solar up on the fire hall as well. And I know that's been complete. Oh, there it is. The solar panels. And there must be still another budget coming, another invoice. Yeah. but it's going to come in line on budget as well, so. I did see, by the way, a staff report. Was that yours, Sean, saying how many kilowatts we've generated? Somebody,
Yeah, it's, you can track it.
yeah, it was quite significant, actually. There's some report, I saw it somewhere, I can't remember where, but it was 500 kilowatts or something?
I can't remember.
Yeah, it was good news anyway, so, thank you, Worship.
Thank you, CFO. Any questions? Councillor Bentamila?
Without getting super specific, like a lot of, or not a lot, but there's some that are at 0% or 1 or 4 that weren't mentioned in the preamble. Are we expecting that those would be done in the last couple of months, or are they just maybe not going to get done this year?
Some will, some won't. Sean can touch on a little bit. The runway extension, for example, I see I spelled extension wrong. That was that grant that has been approved, and so that's going to be carried forward. I don't know if we're going to probably get to that this fall. It'll probably be in the spring. Yeah, so that'll be carried forward, and I don't know if you want to comment on any of the other ones, Sean.
Yeah, we're not going to complete all the projects. The vehicle bridge, I've been working with engineers all summer, and it's been pulling teeth a bit. So we're hoping that we can come up with a plan, and then during general budgets we can discuss that further. But we want to do some maintenance on the vehicle bridge, and I wanted to get it done this year, and it just wasn't happening. Some of the other major ones, airport extension, we'll just finalize the drawings this winter, and then that'll go out to tender in the spring. What other ones are there? There's some smaller design projects, and some of these still haven't seen the final invoicing, so there's still some invoices that come in. Some contractors are a little late on invoicing, so but overall, yeah, we didn't complete all the projects this year for numerous reasons, and COVID being one of them. And but hopefully we can get on track next year.
Thanks.
Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. Any further questions? I'll ask for a mover of the motion to receive the 2020 capital budget financial update. Councillor Schwarzenberger. Second, Councillor Grace. Any further discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving to item 5, update on the BC Community Housing Fund January 2021 intake. Director of Development Services has a report for us.
Thank you, Worship. The purpose of this report is to provide an update on the proposal to the Province of BC's Community Housing Fund January 2021 intake, and for Council to authorize the signing authorities to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the Kiwanis Housing Society of Oliver for the submission of the proposal and ownership and operation of the affordable housing units. We also have Gwyn Simmons from City Spaces, who's been our development consultant. He's joining via Zoom. I just want to make sure Gwyn can hear us and we can hear him.
Yeah, I can hear you. Hopefully you can hear me, Andy.
Yep, we can hear you. Thank you, sir. All right, so application update. The preliminary drawings feature 1,858 square feet of commercial space on the main floor, fronting Main Street, 8,878 square feet of town hall council chambers on the main and second floor, along with 13 units of affordable housing units on the second, third, and fourth floors. The unit count is 7 3-bedroom units, 5 2-bedroom units, and 1 1-bedroom unit, with 20% of the units being accessible. The building features 20 parking spaces with an outside amenity area on the second floor, storage lockers, bicycle storage lockers, and private balconies. The unit count is lower than originally anticipated due to the challenges providing bedroom windows to a mid-block project, in which the building code restricts the number of openings along the interior side parcel lines. More units could be provided if the number of 3-bedroom units were reduced, which is not recommended, as the project focus is on families. The preliminary work for the application has commenced, with drawings and initial cost estimates complete. So just a bit of an update on the work been done so far. A Phase 1 environmental site assessment has been conducted with no issues or concerns raised. A topographic and legal survey plan has been completed, which revealed that an existing firewall on the north portion of the subject property remains partially intact. A structural engineer was retained by the town, which confirmed that the remaining portions of this wall can be removed with no impacts to the neighboring property. A geotechnical assessment has been completed, which revealed that there are existing foundations buried 4 feet below grade throughout the site, along with a mix of material. These can be removed during construction, with new fill likely to be brought in. The development consultant has prepared a preliminary cost estimate and will work on finalizing the details of the application prior to approval by council at the December 14th council meeting. An architect has prepared preliminary drawings for the building, which have been attached to this report and are now shown on the screen. The more detailed drawings that focus on the facades of the building will be completed. This is just preliminary at this time, and it's more to figure out the massing of the building. A preliminary cost estimate has been determined and attached to this report. The findings are as followed, which include 13% contingencies for escalation, as well as include soft costs such as engineers, designs, etc. So the 13 dwelling units are approximately $6.9 million. The town hall, council chambers, including the tenant improvements, which would be the total build out of the building, at around $4.26 million. The commercial space, excluding the tenant improvements, being that if the town wanted to own those spaces, depending on the business that comes in, they would retrofit the building and do the tenant improvements. This total is $11.68 million. An additional equity of $1 to $1.5 million, depending on interest rate, will be required for the residential units. CMHC provides additional grants as a top-up to make these projects both viable and affordable for future residents. This is in addition to the seed funding for design work that will also be applied for as well shortly. City Spaces has been successful in obtaining funding from CMHC in the past, in the amounts of $800,000 for a 10-unit project in Nakusp and $1.4 million for a 35-unit project in Fernie. As part of the Community Housing Fund, capital grants can be obtained at a rate of $100,000 per one-bed unit, $125,000 per two-bed, and $150,000 per three-bed. This equates to $1.775 million that will be given towards the project in this proposed application. Just wanted to touch on the Housing Society, and we have actually the president, Mr. Larson, is here to help answer any questions if required. Town staff have commenced preliminary conversations with the Kiwanis Housing Society of Oliver, who have expressed interest in partnering with the town and applying for the grant funding. Kiwanis currently owns and operates approximately 50 units of housing for low-income seniors, along with 18 townhouse units for low-income families in Oliver, and they have the capacity to operate the 13 proposed units. To speak a little bit about the funding, to fund the approximate $4.5 million town hall, council chambers, and main floor commercial portions of the building, a loan authorization bylaw would be required, which would include an assent process, either way of referendum or alternative approval process. Way to go, Gwen. The burden on taxpayers to reconstruct the town's portion of the proposed building could be significantly lowered by either selling or leasing the proposed main floor commercial units. Another option to be explored further is the town could sell or lease the existing town hall, finance, and council chambers building, the existing visitor center building, if relocated, or the triangle lot on Station Street. Furthermore, the land reserve budget is at $926,000, and that can be utilized for capital projects. Disposing of the properties discussed above while also requiring a housing society to take out the mortgage would minimize the amount of financing required for the town's portion of the project. And lastly, to touch on the timeline. The proposed cost estimates and preliminary design will be brought before the Kiwanis Housing Society Board for feedback prior to the December 14th council meeting, in which council will provide their support of the application and adopt a resolution that would make the site available through a 60-year lease at no cost. It'll ultimately be the Kiwanis Housing Society that'll submit the application to BC Housing. The costs of more detailed design development and building permit drawings should be included in the 2020 budget deliberations so that if BC Housing funding is approved in early spring of 2021, so in April, council decides to move ahead with the project, Then the design work can be completed next year so that the building could commence in 2022 potentially. The design costs would be shared with BC Housing as the town is only responsible for its portion. And I'll give the recommendation first, the staff recommendation, which is that council receive the BC Community Housing Fund intake update, and that council authorize the signing authorities to enter into an MOU with the Kiwanis Housing Society of Oliver for the submission of a proposal to BC's Community Housing Fund and for the ownership and operation of the affordable housing units. But I did want Mr. Simmons to add just a little bit on the process moving forward in April and the pre-development funding portion. If you could just touch on that a little bit, Gwyn.
Sure. You can just hear my voice, right? You can't see me, or can you do that as well?
No, we can't see you, but no, go ahead.
That's okay. That's probably just as well. Well, basically, there's an RFP out, as council may know. It's competitive. It closes in January 15th, and there's a great deal of interest across the province for this. So after it's closed, BC Housing does have a point rating system, and will look at all the different projects and then select the ones that it believes it wants to support to move forward. I'm pretty optimistic about this project. It's pretty innovative to put housing on top of a town hall, and it's in a great location in the middle of the town as well. So I think they'll be pretty intrigued and supportive of it. There is one other project going ahead similar to that at the moment, which you probably know about in Rossland, which we're also working on. But we can't be sure. We won't know until they make that decision. I don't expect it to happen, and probably till later in February, maybe even into March. And it'll be a new fiscal year, probably, that they'll fund projects under. But assuming they do approve the project, what they will then do is offer what's called PDF, pre-development funding, preliminary development funding, which will essentially fund the design of the project up to the start of construction, going through all the different stages, and they'll front end that. There is the option as well of going after CMHC funding. That may not be necessary, because if BC Housing approves it, they would pretty much fund most of the work to be done. And typically, they are fairly flexible. They'll allow the funding to proceed to begin with. There will be, at some stage, a need to divide the cost between yourselves and the society, but initially that you may not have to put any money in. And there is a possibility of actually recovering some of the funds you put in, perhaps for some of the studies. But, that's I can't commit to that, but that's, I think, certainly has happened in other projects. So we won't really know until the spring, but it is essentially a very promising project. And I would just stress that the call is for non-profit societies. So although right across BC municipalities are cooperating with non-profit societies as you are, the submission has to be made by the society itself.
Thanks, Gwyn. I just wanted to also quickly go over the plans, just to run through the floor plans quickly. So if we can bring that up, Ms. Vakovich, please. Is this the... Yeah, so you'll see the parkade has approximately 20 spaces there, 20 parking spaces with some bicycle parking. And then moving into the main floor. So the idea here is that it's designed in a way, the residential entry is on the north side, which is here, separate. The commercial entry, I should say the town hall entry is on the south side, here. And this would be commercial residential units, so approximately 2,000 square feet. You'll see it's drawn, it's split up, but these could be interconnected if the town found a tenant that wanted to use the whole 2,000 square feet. So the idea being a customer with the town would come through here, and they could decide to go into the lobby area here, which is where the town hall reception desk would be, or they could go up the elevator or up the stairs to the second level, which would also be town hall. So ideally, council chambers would probably cover the area close to the elevator here. So council chambers would sort of be in this area here with some senior staff, storage, whatever we decide at that stage. And then the nice thing is it's designed in a way that these are The units are off the back here, so this 2-bedroom here. This is the only 1-bedroom unit in the building, and the reason why is because it provides a hallway to a back shared amenity area, and this amenity area could actually extend almost the whole length except for these little patio areas, and this would be an area where the building could gather outside. And then the 3-bedroom unit there. And then if you move up to the 3rd and 4th floors, they're pretty similar in being that at the front there's the 3-bedroom units, 2 of them, and then 3-bedroom unit here, and 2-bedroom units here. What we had to do is actually have a little notch out in the building, you'll see here and there, and that's to be able to have windows and for the bedrooms. Yeah, and that's the building design there. So I think with that, we'll take any questions and comments from council. The purpose of this meeting is to update council and get their feedback so we can move towards the December 14th council meeting where we'll be able to have full support from council and the Kiwanis Housing Society. Thank you.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Worship. So I'm really excited about this project. I think the focus on the housing for families is really important, especially considering the other affordable housing project that we have coming to Oliver that's mostly stacked with 1-bedroom units. So I think it's great that we were able to put in as many 3-bedroom units in here as we could. I'm wondering if you know, with the 50, 30, 20 rental model, how that would sort of be disseminated across the different unit sizes.
Yeah, I know Gwyn has that information. Gwyn, did you hear the question?
Sure, yeah, I did get that.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll have to, when we sort of move towards finalising this and a report will come to council and to the society, we'll have that mix. It is quite complicated because you're right, you have to have the 3 different categories, and they like to distribute them across the units, and we have sort of a bit of an odd mixture. There'll probably be about 7 or 8 different rent levels as a result, depending on the unit sizes. So we'll bring a report with those laid out for you.
Thank you. And one other, if I may.
Sure.
I understand that the facade design is coming later on, but just to mention that I think it's important that it sort of falls in line with the heritage theme that the rest of our Main Street has. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mattis.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think it's a great project. I'm really glad we're doing something, or the potential to do something in the downtown core. My question is, I noticed the town hall cost per square foot is about in the $500 range, and the retail portion is half that, and I just wondered if you could explain why one is half the other. It comes in at about $250 a square foot.
Are you speaking about the town hall versus the commercial
Yes.
shell?
Yes.
Yeah, so those costs were the commercial, that was just the shell, not the actual build out. That wasn't the tenant improvements.
Gotcha.
Yeah, whereas the town hall, it was the tenant improvements. Yeah, so that cost that we're providing of, I believe, 4.26 million, that's for the full build out of town hall, all the furniture and everything. That is approximate, but yeah, that's where that number comes from. Thanks.
Councillor Ventimiglia.
Just a couple of little things. I mean, along with everyone else, even though I've always been resistant to the idea of town hall in this specific location, I think as a package deal with the housing and with everything that you've been working on, I think that it makes sense. And I am excited for the project. But just a couple of questions. I mean, Councillor Grice already mentioned one of them. You said that the more detailed drawings are to come, but to emphasize, I know we talked about it last time, this is the first decent-sized development to go into our historic Main Street in a really long time, and we have the opportunity to do it right. And so I think it's very important that we do everything that we can to fall in line with the historic feel of that corridor, because there are other empty spaces, as we all know, and so we can be setting the tone for what goes into those other places. So I think that's very important. Parking, I've heard. And I agree with the concerns that I've heard, or murmurs that I've heard, that 20 stalls for 13 units plus fully functioning town hall is not a lot and probably not sufficient. So I don't know if there's a way to get more parking out of there, that's great. But if not, I think we do need to have a larger conversation at some point about what that actually means. You know, if if this goes ahead, if town staff is parking off-site and just our parking plans for downtown in general as time goes on. And the windows, this just struck me when you just showed us your plans. Those windows that you have the insets on the sides of the building, like, oh, you know what? I think I just answered my question as I was about to say it. I'm thinking windows to nowhere. This is locked, but this is the 3rd and 4th floor. So out in the open. Got it. I just needed to say it out loud. Thanks.
Councillor Schwarzenberger.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I am excited about this project too, and I know that the Downtown Revitalization Committee has been talking about some design guidelines that the Director of Development Services had put forward, so I hope that the exterior of this building would be added to that. I think the parking is an issue, but we do have 25 parking spots at the Coast Hotel that the town of Oliver owns, and I think that would help to alleviate some of the parking issues, if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess I'll make it unanimous. I'm really excited about this project for sure. I think it's a kind of a catalyst to a lot of things happening, a lot of good things happening for town of Oliver downtown and associated Station Street. So very excited about this. Will anyone move the motion? Councillor Grace?
Sure,
Second.
yes, I'll move that council receive the BC Community Housing Fund January 2021 intake update, and that council authorize the signing authorities to enter into an MOU with Kiwanis Housing Society of Oliver for the submission of a proposal to BC's Community Housing Fund and for the ownership and operation of the affordable housing units.
What she said.
Seconded by Councillor Schwarzenberger. Councillor Ventimiglia?
One more comment that I think we just glazed over there in our question and answer period is that I'm excited to see that the society that's being partnered with is Kiwanis. I know the last time you presented to us, you couldn't share that information, but Kiwanis has, we all know, an excellent record in our community. And so I'm excited to see that they're the ones that we're moving forward with.
I will call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving to correspondence. Corporate Officer?
I too was enjoying that report. Thank you, Your Worship. The November 9th correspondence report before Council has no action items except for the replies sent under existing policies. The Oliver Search and Rescue requested a quick letter of support with regards to their application for ground search canine endorsement to Emergency Management BC. A letter of support was drafted for the mayor's signature and is attached for your endorsement, and that the weekly mail correspondence be received.
Thank you, Corporate Officer. Any questions? Going to move her the motion? Moved. Councillor Grace. Second, Councillor Ventimiglia. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving to reports, we have the building permit activity report for October 2020 to be received. Has anybody got any comments or questions on the report?
I'll move receipt.
Move receipt. Second, Councillor Grace. I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving to council reports. Councillor Marieze.
Thank you, Your Worship. On the October 29th, there was the Okanagan Regional Library Finance Committee meeting. There's some exciting things going on there that I wish I could tell you. And on November 3rd, the Gallagher Lake Siphon Sod Turning. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Marieze. Councillor Schwarzenberger.
Thank you, Your Worship. A busy couple of weeks personally, so tonight's meetings, and just to shout out to anybody who's still listening, if you want some real excitement, we start budget negotiations tomorrow at 3:30.
Thank you, Councillor Schwarzenberger. Councillor Ventimiglia.
Thank you. So on Tuesday, October the 3rd, with most of council, I was at the Gallagher Lake sod turning as well. But lots of excitement tonight. That's another exciting, sod turning, it's not that exciting really, but it's exciting to be there, to see something that we've talked about for years and years and years happening. Thursday the 5th and Friday the 6th, I attended the regional district, one day in person and one virtually, as an alternate this time, back up for Director Johansson. And the days were filled with information sessions, legislative workshops, and the inaugural meetings.
Thank you, Councillor Ventimiglia. Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Your Worship. Along with the rest of council, I attended the Gallagher Lake sod turning on Tuesday, November 3rd, and today's meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grace. On October 28th, I virtually attended an FCM Climate Leadership course. On October 30th, the poppy pinning ceremony. Please try and join us virtually on November 11th. Definitely a different type of ceremony this year. The Legion will not be open at all on November 11th anywhere in BC, unfortunately. November 3rd, the Gallagher Lake sod turning ceremony. November 5th and 6th, RDOS. November 7th, I had the pleasure of doing the draw at the fire department virtual ticket draw at the fire hall, and I did have a conversation with Chief Clarence Louie today on the community to community forum, and he endorsed the idea. I thought it was a good thing for us to apply for the grant, and we will see if we are able to have any type of community to community forum in before the end of March next year. If not, we'll apply again. Upcoming meetings, November 10th, tomorrow, budget deliberations. November 23rd is our next regular open council meeting. Acting mayor schedule for November is Councillor Ventimiglia, and then December, January, February is Councillor Schwarzenberger. We come to public question period. Is there anyone left in our public that would like to ask a question? Please come on down.
Thank you, Your Worship, Your Council. I guess my question specifically is, wow, what a great presentation from Kiwanis. It's a BC Housing grant. You had another BC Housing grant presentation. My question would be specifically why there isn't a concern that there's a great disparity between the two. You ask for one thing and you're getting the moon. You're looking for another thing, you're not necessarily getting that when you look at the two different presentations. You wanted a shelter for 50 people, a cold weather shelter. What you were offered was a temporary shelter in the basement for 8 people, prejudiced specifically on a very finite line. I would ask the council to think about what you want. You've asked for a permanent shelter, or you've asked for help for the most needy, and you've been given a presentation of, here's 8 people, we don't know how to do it. And this is just where we're going to force it in a can and make it work. My question would be, think about that. You can see the experience of Kiwanis and what they presented through a BC Housing grant. It's tremendous. I mean, it's tremendous. It really is. So that would be my first question, to really ask that and put that together, drive a solution that meets that level. And then the other one is, that takes time. We know that we just got a little bit of a grant from the government for COVID. Is there an ability to take some of that money and achieve what you started off in 2017, which was, we need to help out in extreme cold, because extreme cold is here, right? Like, we know it's snowing now. This isn't a good weather to not have a house. See if there is a piece of budget that comes up tomorrow that you can at least do something, right? Like, that's the honest to goodness truth. Like, is there something out of that 1.5 million that we can do that's moving us in the right direction of helping the most needy? And then can we take that presentation from Kiwanis, copy it, duplicate it, and try and achieve what the original gap and need was for 50 people that need help, not 8, not 8 plus 2, not in the bottom of a church, and not with neighbors that are going, oh my goodness, yikes, this doesn't seem like a solution that makes sense. You watch that Kiwanis one, and I think that would be pretty hard to not say, congratulations, you guys are really knocking it out of the park on that endeavor. So those are my questions.
Thank you. I guess I would say thank you for your comments. Those are more suggestions, I think, than questions. You're questioning us to think outside the box, which is awesome. And I think we hear what you're saying, and it gives us some food for thought, for sure. There's different types of need in the community, and I know we have talked about supportive housing before, and we were looking for Desert Sun to come and give us a presentation on exactly what the needs are in our community. So thank you for those comments, and we will take them under consideration and be thinking about them as we're talking about budget in the next 2 or 3 months, and thinking ahead in the future on our strategic planning.
Perfect. You guys have a great night.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, I will ask for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Grace, Councillor Schwarzenberger, call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Council.